I'm lucky enough to have managed to gather speakers who bring in a host of different views. I'll introduce them one by one. Here we got Leila. Leila is interested in matters of social justice, in particular race and gender justice. She's a member and founder of the Same Sky Collective, a group of people working for a hopeful, fair and inclusive regional democracy in the North. She writes blogs and on social justice issues, and she facilitates events for Just West Yorkshire. Then we got Vicky Seddon, sitting next to her. Vicky is a friend, and she's chair of Unlock Democracy. She coordinates Sheffield for Democracy, so she's really active, and she's got a wide and long-standing knowledge on issues of democracy across the north of England. Safeguarding democracy and human rights and contributing to good governance in a variety of organisations has been an enduring interest of Vicky. Then we got Diana Wallis. Diana is by profession a lawyer, and she's also a senior fellow of the law school at the University of Hull. Diana in 1999 was elected to the European Parliament as one of the members for Yorkshire and Humberside, and re-elected in 2004 and 2001. She was Vice President of the Parliament from 2007 to 2012, and then she resigned from Parliament. At the moment, Diana again has got a long-standing interest in and commitment to regionalism, and is now a leading member of the regionalist party Yorkshire First. Then we got Paul Salveson down there. Paul, again, is a friend, and we've been working. Yes, we are. That is true. And is a founding member of the Hannah Mitchell Foundation, and was convener until recently when he stepped down. And I have to say that I'm really sorry about that, because you've been really doing a great job there. And in the 2015 general election, he stood for Yorkshire with Yorkshire First for Corn Valley. He's also visiting professor of transport and logistics at the University of Huddersfield. So I'll leave it on to them to offer what I'm sure is going to be a very interesting view of the devolution debate from the grassroots. So perhaps challenging what we have heard so far. Leila is going to go first.
Well, I'm happy to see that we kind of made up for the lack of diversity on the previous panels, and we've got a majority of female panels, so that's cool. So I'm going to be honest here. When I first came across the term devolution, which wasn't actually shockingly that long ago, I found the term incredibly boring. I mean, what does devolution even mean to the average Joe on the street? Surprisingly, it actually probably rings more bells with Darwinism than it actually does with the true meaning of the word. And I'm not just speculating here. I've talked to people on the ground, and that's what they actually thought it meant. So, the agenda in England, in contrast to the bottom-up approach that happened during the Scotland referendum, is often led by Oxford politicians, local authorities, and suited and booted business representatives, as you can probably already see and have gathered. This has resultantly served to exclude and disengage the public, as they see it as something that's remote, far away from their daily lives, and decided out there in the corridors of Westminster and in local authorities' offices behind closed doors. Most ordinary people have no actual awareness of what the council does, despite its protocols and procedures. They neither have any awareness of what local politics is about, nor who's standing in their local area. So why would they know about devolution? In England, we often feel green with envy, disillusionment, when comparing our experiences to the democratic revival in Scotland. It's been mentioned quite often today. But there is no reason as to why we cannot do the same here, especially if we kind of turn this scepticalness and this kind of frustration into a sense of positivity, inclusivity, and hopefulness. We will eventually be able to mobilise people on the ground to turn it into a movement of our own. So the question is, how do we turn devolution into an opportunity? The North has plenty of potential, but it's time to take the steps to unlock that potential. The solution, in my eyes, is to reframe devolution into something that is interesting to people on the ground, so it relates to their daily frustrations and struggles. For example, lack of jobs in the North, which really frustrates me. Every single job is down in London, and I mean practically every single job. The lack of efficient and cost-worthy public transport, the north-south divide, housing, infrastructure. There's plenty of things that people are actually frustrated about, but it's just turning that and relating it to devolution. So you go on about the fact that there's no movement, but there will be a movement if you just know how to frame it and market it. At the moment, the term devolution for me is too closely related to Scotland and is somewhat seen as a tarnished word which automatically alienates young people and people already uninterested in Westminster-style politics. I mean, if you wanted to pick a word that only attracts white men in suits, then there you have it. When I first arrived this morning, the first thing I noticed was the fact that all I could hear was male voices, and the only visible minorities are the people that I brought to the event today. So if we led our marketing campaigns on things like lack of efficient transport, etc., then I reckon that people would come on board. So I'm always complaining about how most of my friends have had to succumb to the pull of the South because they're not really in a position to pick and choose their job, and they're often left with a 27k debt trailing behind them, including myself, and also no real work experience, so they've not really got any choice in the matter. So why should young people be forced to move to a place where it costs you in gold to rent a box miles away from the city and where no one gives a monkeys as to whether you're dying in the street or whether you've won the lottery? I mean, maybe people are so used to the polar ends of the inequality that is so rife in London, I'm not really sure. Friends that visit me in the South always complain about the lack of efficient and also cost-worthy transport. So people do experience these frustrations, but it's how we relate to devolution. So instead we should be looking at consciousness raising around the symptoms of an over-centralised government that gives precedence to London, rather than the technocratic process of devolution itself and squabbling over whether we want a Yorkshire-wide bid or a Leeds City region bid, as we saw earlier. So if we are truly devolving power to local people, where are the people? There is also a danger of mirroring the London economic model and not playing to our region's strengths. Instead of perpetuating the UK's over-reliance on the financial and services sector, what we should be doing is looking at to develop manufacturing and an industrial base and developing high-tech industries to retain more graduates that already attend northern universities rather than feeding the brain drain down to the south. However, what we don't want is the rooted inequality that is so profound in London already. We need good growth. There has been an understandable tendency, as was mentioned earlier, to jump on the oppositional and sceptical politics bandwagon regarding our fear that Osborne will in fact devolve cuts instead of power. We all know that. It is evident that devolution needs to be accompanied by real resources. Nonetheless, focusing on the negative will only turn that into an inevitable reality in my eyes. Instead, we need to take progressive steps to ensure that we are the start of our own movement. Public pressure is one of the most effective ways to change policy, government policy. That's when the government finally starts listening to you. But there's a completely lack of that at the minute, so we need to make that happen. So I'm going to be honest here, when I go to events like these usually, I often find that they're full of, no offence by the way, dry and contentless rhetoric that I feel like nothing ever really gets anywhere. We don't actually come up with any action points. Such as, things are usually said like, yeah, we need to engage more people, but nothing's said around how we go about doing these things. So I hope that we walk away from today filled with confidence and the drive to pledge to do one concrete action that will help facilitate democratic self-determination. Thank you.
First to say, I'm from Sheffield, and once we've been negative comments about Sheffield taking itself out of Yorkshire. To give you some facts, the Sheffield City region is comprised of the 4 South Yorkshire local authorities, Rotherham, Doncaster, Sheffield and Barnsley, and 5 North Nottinghamshire and North Derbyshire local authorities, Bolsover, Bassetlaw, Chesterfield, North East Derbyshire and Derbyshire Dales, of which the non-Yorkshire local authorities, the population is 23% of that combined authority, just 23%, so it's got a relatively small part of it. And just to say that half of the people in that combined authority area are led by women council leaders. Half of them. Yeah? Only 3 local authorities, but because the biggest one, Sheffield, is run by a woman. Yeah, Julie Dorr, bless her. So it isn't true that it's just men who are have got fingers in the pie here. There are some women creeping up through the system, the long march through the institutions, and we are getting there in some ways, if not fast enough, of course. Okay, so the process started in Sheffield back in 2014 when, again, there was an earlier deal which Nick Clegg, bless him, signed for us. And then, of course, post the Conservative government coming in, there was the Manchester deal, which, in my opinion, has really pulled the rug from underneath us in terms of trying to go for something which was a much better deal, of working together across the different cities and local authorities, going for a better deal, and a deal which didn't have an imposed element of governance which has not been agreed by the people as part of it. So I'm quite critical of Manchester acting alone. I think it's really made life very difficult for those who followed. They've done that deal, and of course everyone says, oh well, the Manchester deal is there. And then we did in Sheffield the city deal, when I say we, the Sheffield City Region Combined Authority signed a headlines agreement in October 2015, just in time for George Osborne to go to the Conservative Party conference and kind of wave it as his next step in doing the Northern Powerhouse. And I was, early doors, I was quite critical of that, because I thought, why on earth would you give George Osborne a flag to wave? But when I talk to people, and I do take this quite seriously, what they said was, because he wanted to have something to wave, we managed to get the 25 million a year up to 30 million a year. Yeah? So they used that leverage of his desperation to get something, to get a slightly better, not a wonderful deal, but a slightly better deal. Okay, so since then, there have been a plethora of meetings of one kind or another to discuss this deal. And that's where the kind of the public has had some opportunity to be involved in the argument. I'm not saying that the general public has got itself involved, but there have been opportunities. For example, there was the Festival of Debate in Sheffield. Compass had its Radical Hope conference in the autumn. The WEA had a meeting with some national speakers. Sheffield for Democracy, that's my little group with the People's Assembly. We had a public meeting that anybody could come to and discuss the issues. SPERI had its own meetings. Of course, there was the White Rose thing that I wasn't allowed to come to because it wasn't open to the public. It was only open to academics. So there was a little criticism of those of you who didn't let me in there. Sheffield First, which is kind of associated with the City Council, had its meeting only but, when was it, Nigel? Last Thursday. The Labour Party meetings of all kinds have happened, both regionally, constituency-based, ward-based, and some of which I've spoken at. Kerslake was invited by the Civic Trust to speak about housing, and he managed to get a question about the morality involved in it. Oh my goodness, I've only got 2 more minutes. So there's been a whole lot of discussion, is what I'm saying. What's happened now is there's then been, and we at Sheffield for Democracy have been to the Combined Authority meetings to ask questions, because you're allowed to in the Combined Authority in our area, to actually ask questions about the elected mayor, about the powers, about the consultation process. And also the Sheffield City Council Scrutiny Committee had a meeting that anybody in Sheffield could go to and ask questions. The consultation period was from the middle of December to the middle of January, across the holiday period. Interesting, not a very convenient time for many of us, but there was an opportunity, although it wasn't very obvious on the City Council website, just exactly how to go about it. And there are those 2 issues which Julie Dore, our councillor, says are red lines. One is about the veto, the mayor having a veto, and the other is about the status of the non-constituent authorities. That's those 5 which are in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, because they're in 2-tier authorities. At the moment, they haven't been able to have full constituent status. And so, but there was an amendment now going through, we understand, which will give them status, which means the people who live in those areas will get a vote for an elected mayor. Elected mayors. Well, I'm going to have to just say something very briefly about the elected mayors, which is the thing that has generated most public debate, partly, I think, because it's straightforward people can see what an elected mayor is. They know what Boris has been like. They know what Ken was like. And Doncaster, of course, has had an elected mayor ever since they had the problems, the serious problems about corruption and what have you, and they swept away the local authority system and had an elected mayor. Doncaster, by the way, has got an elected mayor. It's got a traditional Lord Mayor, and if we get a kind of a Sheffield City region mayor, there'll be a third mayor we'll have a. So it's interesting, isn't it? Poor old Doncaster. In 2012, there were referenda to see whether or not the big cities would go for an elected mayor. And apart from Doncaster, which had already got one, and Bristol, they all said no. So here was a government that was trying to get the elected mayor system in place by fair means. They're now trying by foul. And we're saying in Sheffield, this is not a devolution deal. Yeah? If you've got a gun to your head, which says you can only have any deal at all, if you get an elected mayor, that's called gun to your head stuff. That is not about devolution. Devolution is about where powers are transferred from one to another. This is about being forced to accept tiny improvements, and they are tiny, in the powers for around infrastructure in Sheffield, economics and infrastructure and some training opportunities, yeah? On the basis that you accept a governance model that we the people have had no say in, and where we have had a say in them, yeah, we have rejected it whole scale. 65% in Sheffield voted against an elected mayor. Don't tell me that the rest of the region would have gone for an elected mayor if it had been offered an opportunity. So we are not calling it devolution, it's an economic deal. The deal has not yet been done, we've been told, but we the people won't have a say other than this consultation process which is now ended. The idea that you change the constitution by George Osborne telling you what is good for you, that is not devolution. That is not what the people want.
So I've only been here this afternoon. I arrived just after the start of the previous panel, and I must say I was getting quite depressed. But echo what Mike McGowan was saying in his question. Well, thank God for Chris Haskins. It actually lifted my spirits quite a lot. And like Chris, I'm a bit of an outsider, but even worse. Chris is obviously from Ireland. I'm from Lancashire. Although we talk about the north, this is very much a Yorkshire event, and I've been here 20 odd years, and I used to joke to my friends that I'm only here on missionary duty, but I think it's probably me that's been converted. So thank you very much for asking me to speak. I don't know whether we're count as a grassroots organisation. We're a membership organisation, the Hannah Mitchell Foundation. Not got a huge membership, but we've been going 6 years, and we're set up to raise debate and discussion on what democratic regional devolution for the North should look like. So we very much welcome today's event. And I think the key point is it's about regions. It's not about giving local government more and more responsibilities and stretching local government to breaking point. It's being stretched at breaking point by the cuts already, but trying to expect them to take on some sort of regional role as well seems both unrealistic and potentially undemocratic. Having been for a fairly short time a local councillor myself, I was elected to basically sort out dog shit and getting the bins emptied. I wasn't elected to look after the sort of strategic direction of Yorkshire or the North as a whole. And it's such a well-established thing, having regional democracy across Europe. Obviously Germany is a place that stands out, but France as well, you've got directly elected regional bodies there. We are certainly fully big enough to be able to have strong regional devolution within the UK, and we've got it already to a certain extent. Greater London's got it. What Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have got is effectively regional devolution to those nations. So I think we need to ask ourselves, well, why? And I think the question asked by the Friends of the Earth person earlier on is absolutely spot on. It's not just because it's a nice thing to do, it's about addressing issues not just around the economy, although that's crucial, but it's also about social and environmental justice and giving people access to power, which they don't have at the moment. And all this debate that's been going on about devolution has largely been a debate taking place, if you can call it a debate at all. It's been going on behind closed doors with the same old politicians. There's been a fear of popular engagement in this process. I can remember about just over a year ago having a conversation with Ed Miliband, and he was more or less buying the argument that yes, regional government would be a good thing, it works very well in Germany and we like what Germany does, but the public won't wear it. They don't want any more politicians, which I'm sure he's reflecting on now. But I think there's two different things at work here. On the one hand, there's huge popular support for getting power out of London. All the surveys that have been done, the Yorkshire Post do it regularly, about 80–85% people say, yeah, we should be getting power out of London. But then, cutting right against that, there is this sort of real antagonism towards old-style traditional politics and creating more bureaucracy and so on, which a lot of the politicians who've got a vested interest with the current system will play on, and they sort of keep bringing out the North East referendum in 2004 and so on. So I think it all leads to some mistaken conclusions that people don't want democratic devolution. I would say they do, and we've seen that very much in Scotland last year. There's lots going on in Wales where if you did try to sort of take away the democratic gains and the Welsh government that's been established, there would be absolute uproar. And so I think there's, and you could say, well, okay, Scotland and Wales, they're nations, Yorkshire isn't, Lancashire isn't, but there's gradations and there's lots of different identities going on here. So I'm a Lancastrian. I very much identify with Yorkshire now, but I also identify with my village in Slathwaite. I identify with the North, and you know, I'm a old enough lefty to say I'm a citizen of the world as well. So I think to say that there are 4 economies in Yorkshire is sort of verging on the sort of metaphysical. You know, there's hundreds of different economies. There's an economy in Slough where I live, but that's part of a Colne Valley economy, a Kirklees economy, and so on. So these things operate on lots of different levels, and people's identities operate on lots of different levels. And one thing that people aren't going to be turned on by is the idea of being part of any city region, whether it's Leeds City Region, Manchester City Region, or what have you. People identify as being Leeds, quite rightly, and good luck to them. I identify with different identities, but trying to sort of put people into sort of very, very technocratic straitjacket. How many people out there, we're talking about the grassroots, go out and ask people in these, well, what does a city region mean to you? What do you think of the combined authority for West Yorkshire? They think, what? What are you talking about? And so people just don't know, and yet these organisations are incredibly powerful in access to big resources. So my argument, and I'm not going to steal Diana's thunder, but I would say Yorkshire is big enough and dirty enough with a population of 5 million and a pretty much a clear, recognisable regional economy, I would say, to have its own accountable body in the same way that Scotland does, with almost exactly the same population and much bigger than Wales. I am a northerner and proud of it. And I think there are some things that are best done on a pan-northern level, and it's good what Peter was saying about a Council of the North. I think it was our idea actually from the Hannah Mitchell Foundation. Remind him about that. Not his. But I think I'm a railwayman, and I'm currently very much involved in the new franchise for the North of England, and that works on a pan-northern basis. It wouldn't make sense having it as a Yorkshire franchise or a North West franchise, which is what it used to be, and it was an absolute pain in the backside trying to manage it. So having certain things delivered at the northern level makes sense, but the level of accountability through Transport for the North is 29 local authorities sitting together and trying to work out, well, how can we plan transport strategically across the north? It's a nonsense, it's a complete joke. Even if you have 3 regional bodies for the North West, the North East and Yorkshire working together as the main constituents of Transport for the North, that would make more sense. And I'm sure if Harold Ellison was here, he would say, well, there should be one Northern Parliament. And I've got a lot of sympathy for that approach. Should I be winding up? Very, very quickly then, where do we go from here? I think there's lots of talk about a constitutional convention. We've had discussions on that. It does sound rather nerdish. I'd say what Leila was saying, that, you know, this can sound all very, very obscure and meaningless. I think the idea of some sort of movement, like what Scotland has had, but not calling it a constitutional convention. It's a bit, does anybody remember that Monty Python sketch about a constitutional convention? We'll not go there. But something that brings in the citizen, the concept of active citizenship, acting on a pan-northern basis, but with debates going on in every community, in every village, in every town, in every city, is a sort of direction that we absolutely must go. And it's about getting in not just the sort of same old people, but talking to young people, getting out into the different diverse communities that's such a strength of the north of England, and getting people's ideas out there. It was interesting when I was standing for Yorkshire First in the general election, the place where there was actually the strongest Yorkshire identity was in Thornton Lodge in Huddersfield, which is a overwhelmingly Asian area. You know, the sort of degree of sort of strength and identity with the Yorkshire brand, bloody awful word, isn't it? It's brand, but you know, that's why we're stuck with it. But people do respond to the sense of their region, and I think it operates on both in the Yorkshire level and also on a pan-northern level. So at that point, I'll shut up and give good Lancashire greetings.
Sitting here today, I think one of the contrasts that has struck me is all these sort of intricate discussions about the sort of devolution that is on offer and how sort of that's being conducted at one level. But then this morning we heard about the idea of some sort of constitutional convention, and yet how and where is that happening? And now all the people, unless I'm mistaken, that are involved in the earlier panels that are meant to be listening to us about this have fled. I'm here on behalf of a party. I think they were described earlier today as wacky historical associations, regionalist parties, Yorkshire First. Well, I've got news for you. You know, there are regionalist parties all over Europe now, and we're actually part of an alliance. You think of places like Catalonia, Corsica, Bavaria, Silesia, all sorts of places all over Europe are coming to the conclusion that, you know, maybe it's better to do things at a regional level than to have these highly centralised, antiquated, central governments. They're no longer fit for purpose. Many of the speakers this morning admitted this, but seem reluctant to let go and look at a way of doing things differently. Now, it seems to me, given the response to Lord Haskins' speech, that there's no need to convince any of you of the strength of the Yorkshire brand. We're already signed up to it. We know we have a history, we know we have an identity, a geographical space that is called Yorkshire. So what's preventing us from taking the next step and doing something more? Why are we allowing everything to be done to us or offered to us from Westminster in a very complicated way in which we're not able to take part in it, we're not able to participate or to shape our own future? What on earth is the matter? Let me try to suggest to you that we need to think of a way of changing the way we do our politics. You know, I'm here on behalf of a party that calls itself Yorkshire First. I have to say that there were many of us when we first thought about this idea that didn't want to be a party. Why? Because party politics, party politicians have become tainted. In the 21st century, we maybe need to find a different way that reaches beyond party of doing our politics. How can we achieve this? Well, again, if we look around the world, when people have held constitutional conventions, They have found ways of getting more people involved, of getting past or around the traditional party structures. You know, I want a democracy that uses new technology, that is prepared to choose people randomly to come and discuss, not because they wear a red, blue, yellow or whatever label, but because they're a citizen of a particular area. It's about all of us, and it's about bringing people in, not keeping people out as we're being kept out at the moment. So new ways of doing our politics, that's what we have to be looking for, and especially in this region. We shouldn't wait, I repeat, for it to be done to us. We should find ways of asking for our own, not constitutional convention, I agree it sounds very lawyerish and technical, our own Yorkshire conversation. That's simple enough, about how we can be, as Lord Haskins said, ambitious for Yorkshire. Because, my goodness, we've got it all here, but we have to ask for it. We have to get ourselves together in a different way to get past all these intricate, messy deals and discussions. So that's what Yorkshire First wants to argue for, a Yorkshire conversation, a new style of doing politics beyond the ordinary political parties. We signed up to the Bell Principles, so it's more of an independent sort of way of thinking. And we want Yorkshire to seize the opportunity that's there. Otherwise, we will get elected mayors and people trying to connect with one another as elected councils from different councillors. You know, I saw it all before. I was once deputy leader of the East Riding Authority for many years, at the time when we had the RDA, at the time when we had the Regional Assembly from Yorkshire, for Yorkshire and the Humber. Much of that was good. But the thing that let it down was that we didn't have directly elected regional politicians. There were people that were also doing this on top of something else, and they couldn't concentrate on the regional dimension. They couldn't concentrate on holding the RDA to account, and they couldn't concentrate on our relationships with Europe. I have seen how this region too often is underpowered, underrepresented and let down by Westminster. We could do much more on our own with direct links with Europe and speaking up for ourselves. We need to grasp this opportunity that's going on and turn it into a different development going forward. Our regional media, like the Yorkshire Post, others are with us. They want us to seize this. Come on, let's do it, please.